Having a cool, safe weekend. Happy Saturday to everybody in the chat and viewing, those who are listening and viewing this live. I'm going to bring you commentary pertaining to Uvalde. It is the latest information and it's still a hot topic in most arenas. Um, Nothing has seemed to have changed much. People are still upset, naturally, parents, community. The source is KHOU 11 News, my first source. There will be two audios I'm going to play during this live. CISD has placed Pete Arredondo on unpaid administrative leave, and my second live will be a commentary, a news commentary pertaining to what happened on that fateful morning. Were officials that were in that hallway afraid to breach the door? This is a two-part topic pertaining to the Uvalde massacre. Thank you for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. If you'd like to donate to the channel and the dream, $DeGanji, 129 Cash App. All stickers are welcome during this live. Thank you for joining me. KHOU 11 is the source.
The Uvalde School Board has canceled a special meeting set for tomorrow. The board had been planning to discuss possibly firing School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo. The district superintendent yesterday recommended he be fired over his response to the shooting massacre at Robb Elementary. But today, the district announced that meeting would take place at a later date, and Arredondo was placed on unpaid leave. He has been accused by the state of making several key mistakes, including not ordering officers to immediately breach the classroom where the gunman carried out the attack.
All right, everybody, that's the first source. Very, very sick information. KHOU 11 is source number one. How do you all feel about Pete Arredondo being placed on unpaid leave? Hello, Cynthia. Thank you for joining me. How do you feel about him being put on leave? Unpaid. Let me make that clear. Unpaid leave. I think it was the right action. You're talking about 2 months or so now into this investigation and horrific tragedy out of Uvalde, Texas, where 19 students plus 2 teachers lost their lives, and he was still able to work and perform his alleged duties as an officer. But as the case unfolded, the storyline, many narratives were placed, and you didn't know what to believe. So many different versions pertaining to the children, the teachers. We later learned that one teacher was in the room that lived. It was a male teacher who has decided not to go back into the classroom to teach. I don't know if he means teaching in that general jurisdiction or teaching altogether. You heard many parents speak out pertaining to their children, different parents speaking about how angry they are. Many have naturally given their response pertaining to the video released. I brought you commentary on that, the perspective from the parents, the community. Now Pete Arredondo has been put on unpaid leave. How do you all feel about him being put on unpaid leave? And as I said, so many versions were out there, narratives, door open, door closed. Teacher went out to pick up supplies. Teacher went out to get food. She thought the door was unlocked. Now we find out the door has been, the lock has been damaged for 3 months. Is that true? Who was giving all this information anyway about the door being broken for 3 months? Where were the security officer or officers on that fateful morning? Where were they? Did the school have one officer on the clock allegedly, or 2 officers? Are all the doors normally locked during school hours? Can you open the door from the outside and get in through a side door, not just the main door? And the main door, do they remain open? What I mean by open, I mean unlocked. They're closed naturally, but can you just walk up into the school and go about the school? What was the protocol before the Uvalde shooting? Could you just walk up into the school through the main doors? Could you go through side doors of the school? Who was supposed to be working that morning? How many officers do they normally have working at the school? Do they have machines to go through, metal detectors? Obviously not. We know that. They didn't have any on the side door because the shooter went in. And we don't know what that certain teacher was doing and not doing because there's different versions. Then she went and hired her an attorney, which that didn't make any sense. So you don't know what's the truth. Then the video has been released pertaining to the officers in the hallway. You see they're standing there talking back and forth with body cameras. You see Arredondo there. You see him at some point trying to open the door with a key. Then he hands the keys to somebody else. Still, a lot of time's gone by. Nobody's breached the door. By the time they breached the door, it's over 77 minutes into them first entering the school, which is a long time if you are suffering from a gunshot wound, if you are bleeding out, if you are petrified, terrified that this killer is going to kill you. That's a long 77 minutes, 76 minutes, 74 minutes, whatever the actual time is. I've also brought you commentary where officers standing outside the school asking, what are we doing here? So you have to ask yourself, why did he say that? What are we doing here? That's a crazy thing to say. But I wasn't there to know the mind frame of why he was standing there. The assumption is that you're supposed to be there to protect the school, the entities in the school, the students, the children, faculty, staff. But he says, what are we doing here? How crazy to have that now play out on a national platforms. To hear an officer say, what are we doing here? Then we hear there was a sergeant outside. So what was his role? Because Arredondo has downplayed his role. He basically says he was a responder, not a commander. So who is the real chief of police in Uvalde, Texas? I am confused to that. Because they clarify him as chief of schools. So is he just the chief of the school district security officers? Or what is his role exactly? Well, he doesn't have a role now. He's on unpaid administrative leave. And I'm happy, thrilled, matter of fact. And I'm sure the community and the teachers and the families of the deceased are just as pleased. But the sad part is it took this long, 2 months. It's too long. So will there be charges against Arredondo and the officers in the hallway? Do you think they should be charged with gross negligence and or murder? Plural. 20 plus people to charge with murder, with the deaths of these 20-something people. Should Arredondo and the staff be charged? Nearly 400 people are on the property. Let's go there. Nearly 400. 369, from my understanding. So you have all these people outside. That's why it's easy to judge the situation because of all the people you had outside. Then you had a slew of people in the hallway. I do not know the exact number of people that were in the hallway, officers, but nonetheless, you had a lot of children, plus 3 teachers, from my understanding, that were in both adjoining rooms who were petrified. So when you count what was in the room, the number of people in the room versus what was in the hallway versus what was outside on the property, spectators, parents, and officers, they outweigh the number of people in the room where the threat was. And you can't go back. You can't take it back. Oh, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. And my other question is this: why didn't an officer in that hallway say to himself, plural, we need to go in here. We can't continue to stand out here in this hallway. There are teachers and children in there. Then they got wind that there were calls coming from the classroom to the 911 dispatch. So you hear that play out on the walkie-talkies during the video footage that has been released. So they found out that children had phones and were calling 911. So you can't ever say, well, we didn't know that there were alive people in there. Well, then you heard him shoot more than one time. So common sense should tell you somebody was alive in there. The shooter was alive, hello. So it doesn't even matter. The shooter was alive, and that's the threat. He's the threat. Whether you knew who was alive or dead behind those doors, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to go in to assess the threat. And if indeed there were alive participants in there, your job was to go in to save anybody that was in the line of fire, in imminent danger, whether you knew if they were alive or not. And that was one of the narratives in the beginning. We thought the children or whomever were dead because we didn't hear anything. But yet the audio's been released, the video's been released, and you can hear the shooter shooting right when Arredondo passes the keys to the other officer and the officer is trying to breach the door. He shoots again, the shooter. So you were in there in that hallway to hear and see the shooter shooting in the room through the walls. Because there is a point in the video in the beginning where you all are ducking down from the shooter shooting through the walls. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, when Arredondo passes the keys to the officer to try to breach the door because he couldn't get the key to fit, the shooter began to shoot again. You had ample enough time to breach the door. And yes, it is obvious you all were afraid on that fateful morning, because you should have had enough artillery in that hallway to shoot the lock off the door. Come on with it, Queen. Where were the windows to this classroom? Were there no windows to breach the door? To breach inside through a window. You all got other children and teachers out of other classroom windows, but nobody thought to get children out of a window at this school. So I'm going to ask again, were there windows to the adjoining classrooms? Because you don't hear anything about any windows. And I find that strange that no one has said, yes, the classrooms had windows. No, they did not. And if you're going to get a sharpshooter, that leads me to believe that there had to have been windows, because a sharpshooter, that would be his or her job. Is to find a way to shoot the suspect. So if you have all these people in the hallway with heavy artillery, the flip of that question would be, well, then why would you need a sharpshooter? You already have people in the room, in the hallway. And yes, your life is in danger because you can't see through the door, and the shooter can't see through the door. And that would be a scary thing, trying to open the door. He can hear you and he starts shooting through the door. So somebody would get injured or dead. But that is your job. It's no different in any situation you go into, to a house, a school, a restaurant, a bar, an open arena. You don't know what's going on. So you get there and you try to assess the situation, but you cannot let a killer sit in a place with people and gun them all down, because he did that initially when he got into the classroom. And to assume that everybody was dead was the wrong assertion. Thank you for joining me. This is Everyday Shenanigans. I will now play you audio number 2 pertaining to this situation. Thank you all so much for joining me. Trying to pull up my next video. Thank you all for joining me. As I said, CISD has placed Pete Arredondo on unpaid administrative leave. Tell me how you all feel about that. This next commentary is about 15 minutes long. This is MSNBC. And this is saying a Uvalde report shows that the police officers were afraid to enter the classroom. Thank you all so much for joining me.
To be the chief of police of the Uvalde School District's 5-person police force held a public meeting tonight in Uvalde at the high school. The day after the Texas House of Representatives released a report that blamed Chief Arredondo, along with hundreds of other police officers, for waiting too long to enter a classroom to stop a mass murderer at Robb Elementary School.
Why the hell does he still have a job with y'all?
administrative leave at this point.
Are you going to fire him?
That will be a decision. We will take the report into consideration. It will be a closed session decision.
If he's not fired by noon tomorrow, then I want your resignation and every single one of you board members, because y'all do not give a damn about our children or us. Stand with us or against us, because we ain't going nowhere.
The school board that hired Pete Arredondo has been strangely protective of him and his job since he did not have the common decency to resign the day after the mass murder.
Exactly.
Jasmine Kazara's 9-year-old sister, Jackie, was murdered in her classroom at Robb Elementary. Jasmine is a high school senior in Uvalde who joined us on this program last week. Tonight, Jasmine challenged the school board for the long list of security failures in the Uvalde school system that are described in the Texas House of Representatives report.
How am I supposed to come back here? I'm going to be a senior. How am I supposed to come back to this school? What are you guys going to do to make sure I don't have to watch my friends die? What are you going to do to make sure I don't have to wait 77 minutes
Ooh, say that, baby.
bleeding out on my classroom floor,
Amen.
just like my little sister did?
Yes.
I know there's nothing you can do to bring my sister back, but maybe, just maybe if you do something to change this, you can prevent the next family from losing their child. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Constance.
Tina Taylor and her daughter, May Lee Taylor, a student at Robb Elementary, said this.
My daughter has something to say.
This was the last dress that all my friends saw me on. Most of those kids were my friends. And that's not good. And I don't want to go to your guys' school if they don't have protection.
Say that, baby.
And she's encouraging for her friends not to go to school too. Advocacy starts at this age.
Amen.
Leadership is standing up here and showing our children that that is not leadership. That is poor leadership.
The bipartisan report from the Texas House of Representatives is the most thorough report now available on the mass murder and its aftermath. The report indicates there was no chain of command for the 376 federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who showed up at the school.
So now they say
Documents
376.
Pete Arredondo's failure to assume the role of commander, even though he co-wrote the procedural manual that automatically made him the commander of any school shooting incident. But the report also blames all of the rest of the police forces that showed up that day, all of whom had the authority to take command of the situation, which the report described as, quote, chaos. The report says the entirety of law enforcement and its training, preparation, and response shares systemic responsibility for many missed opportunities on that tragic day. The entirety of law enforcement. Pete Arredondo testified to the investigation that he did not know that there were any students or teachers alive or dead inside the classroom with the shooter. But police body cam video released by the city of Uvalde yesterday shows a 911 dispatcher telling an officer at the school that a child has been calling 911 from inside the classroom.
Wait, what was that? Well, the victims, child called 911. The room is full of victims. Child 911.
A child's 911 call from a room full of victims. And because of the police-created chaos at the school, there is no evidence that that child's call for help was relayed to the police officers, including Pete Arredondo, who were closest to the classrooms in the school. The officers who had to make the decision when to go into the classroom to try to kill the mass murderer. The House report even faults the group of police officers who finally did go through that classroom door, faults them for waiting too long to do it. Police slowly assembled 4 shields that they could use for protection when entering the classroom, but the first 3 shields that arrived at the school were not capable of going up against an AR-15. The final shield delivered inside the school was provided by U.S. Marshals, and it was the only one that was rifle-rated, a rifle-rated shield that could take on an AR-15. 30 minutes after that shield arrived, Border Patrol officers used that shield to go in and kill the mass murderer. And when they did that, none of those officers were injured in any way.
Interesting.
The first thing that officers on the scene heard about the murder weapon, according to police body cam video, was, quote, "It's an AR." And none of the police officers in that school were willing to go up against an AR-15, even the officers who had assault rifles themselves. The AR-15 left 376 law enforcement officials in terror and chaos for 77 minutes. They were afraid of being killed by that weapon, and that is why they all violated their active shooter response training, according to the Texas House report. The AR-15 stopped them all in their tracks. And they did not dare go into that classroom until they had a rifle-rated shield to protect themselves from an AR-15. The report has a long list of factors that contributed in some way to 19 murdered children and 2 murdered teachers and a gravely wounded teacher who survived. The list of factors includes not keeping all doors locked at all times in the school because, among other reasons, substitute teachers did not have keys to the locked doors. The report neglects to mention that before AR-15s became easy to purchase over the counter in this country, no one worried about locked doors in American classrooms. The factors that led to the mass murder included people who knew the mass murderer and ignored the signs about him that were so obvious that his online friends and some of his former school classmates, their nickname for him was School Shooter.
Lord,
in a section about the murderer, the report says the shooting took place in his former 4th grade classroom.
Wow.
By 2021, at age 17, the attacker had only completed the 9th grade.
Wow.
He was quoted by a girlfriend as saying, quote, that he wouldn't live past 18 either because he would commit suicide or simply because he wouldn't live long. Online, he shared, quote, gruesome videos and images of suicides, beheadings, accidents, and the like. The attacker became focused on achieving notoriety. The attacker had no real expenses and hoarded money, telling acquaintances that he was saving for something big and that they would all see him in the news one day. The attacker developed a fascination with school shootings, of which he made no secret. Even those he personally knew in his local chat group began calling him the school shooter. None of his online behavior was ever reported to law enforcement. As soon as the attacker turned 18 on May 16, 2022, just 1 week before the shooting on May 24, 2022, he was finally able to purchase guns and ammunition. An online retailer shipped 1,740 rounds of 5.56 millimeter 75 grain boat tail hollow point to his doorstep. At a cost of $1,761.50, he ordered a Daniel Defense DD-M4 V7, an AR-15 style rifle for shipment to a gun store in Uvalde at a cost of $2,054.28. And on May 17, 2022, he bought a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, also an AR-15 style rifle, at the same store in Uvalde at a cost of $1,081.42.
Nearly $44,000.
drove him to the gun store
This is crazy.
to pick up his murder weapons. And of course, the owner of the gun store described the attacker as an average customer with no red flags or suspicious conditions, but patrons of the store who saw him told a different story in FBI interviews, saying after the tragedy that the attacker was very nervous looking and that he appeared odd and looked like one of those school shooters. Another described his all-black clothing as simply giving off bad vibes. So, someone who patrons of a gun store think looks like a school shooter
Yeah.
has no problem from that gun dealer in Texas
Yes.
buying mass murder weapons. Tucked in the middle of a long list of factors that contributed to the mass murder, everything from faulty door locks to faulty police work, there
Yes.
is the single factor, the one factor without which everyone at that school would be alive today.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a contributing factor. This is the reason for the mass murder.
Mm-hmm.
The report makes clear that even if the door that the murderer used to enter the school was locked, he probably still would have been able to find his way into that school.
Yes.
If you change any one of those security factors at the school, the mass murder might still have happened. If you improve the police response to the mass murder, some of the victims might be alive today because some of the children died on the way to the hospital
Wow.
80 minutes later than when they should have been going to the hospital.
Right.
But some of those children were murdered instantly,
Yes.
and nothing in the police response would have changed that. The one factor in the report that was the decisive factor in this mass murder is on page 73 of the 77-page report. It says there was no legal impediment to the attacker buying 2 AR-15 style rifles, 60 magazines, and over 2,000 rounds of ammunition when he turned 18. The Republican governor of Texas and the Republican legislature have made sure that that mass murderer was able to buy those weapons.
Yes.
They've made sure that Texas mass murderers are the best equipped mass murderers in the world. And the last president from Texas, George W. Bush, willfully made sure that the assault weapons ban legislated by Senator Joe Biden expired after 10 years. And after 10 years, when shootings like this were reduced by that assault weapons ban, the Republican President George W. Bush and Republicans in Congress decided it's time to make sure that American mass murderers remain the best equipped mass murderers in the world. They did that. Government, Republican government, allowed that mass murderer in Uvalde to plan his purchase of weapons of war to use for mass murder in his former 4th grade classroom. A mass murderer with an AR-15 walked into a shopping mall in Indiana yesterday and killed 3 people before he was killed by an unarmed 22-year-old man who happened to be in the mall at the time and was lawfully carrying his own gun.
Wow.
That is the very rare good guy with a gun story that the
Yes.
National Rifle Association and Republican politicians want us to believe is the actual solution to mass murder.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those people, many of those politicians are calling that story a success story for the good guy with a gun theory of defense. They don't seem to notice that they are accepting within their success story the idea of 3 people at a shopping mall being murdered by an AR-15 before the good guy with a gun does his thing. And I'm very glad that the good guy with the gun was luckily positioned to do that. But that was just a matter of luck.
Yes.
At Robb Elementary School, there were 376 good guys with guns.
Yes.
And they all, every one of them, to varying degrees, failed, according to the Texas House of Representatives report.
Woo! That is a lot of information. That is a very well-written commentary. This is MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell's details of the systemic failures of the Texas House Committee report finds contributed to the mass shooting in Uvalde. But he says the single decisive factor in this mass murder, quote unquote, that prevented 376 heavily armed officers from confronting the gunman for 77 minutes was his AR-15 weapon. If you need verification for the information that you just heard, MSNBC is the source. This was uploaded July 18, 2022, 5 days ago. This was a very well written commentary. And the first source was KHOU 11 News out of Texas. Let's chop up what Mr. O'Donnell has said in this commentary. You have to start from the top to the bottom in accountability. This is Republican law about being able to purchase a gun at 18, the state of Texas. He was able to go get all this ammunition, rifles, guns. And when you look at the numbers, it's about $4,000 or so when you tally it up. That's a lot of money to save up. So you're starting from the top to the bottom as far as the government. Their laws have allowed people to be able to go purchase a gun. And obviously he didn't do a background check. Was a background check done on this guy? Mental evaluation? You see, just because you're legal to carry the gun, you don't have anything in your past. If a background check is been given, that has nothing to do with your mental state. See, a lot of people get it confused with, well, I'm old enough, I don't have a criminal background, I don't have a felony, I can go purchase a weapon. What does that have to do with your mindset? What is your mindset? The fact that this person only finished the 9th grade should tell you something. So who was the parents raising him up until he lived with the grandmother? It is alleged he lived with his mother. What's your damn problem? I'm putting blame everywhere, from the top to the bottom. Starting with our government, not having stricter laws with purchasing guns and protocols to receive the gun, purchase the gun, guns, artillery, ammunition. Parental guidance is number 2. No one was watching this kid. Nobody cared about this kid because he showed signs something was wrong with him. And as Mr. O'Donnell says in this commentary, if you have people saying things about him online in Facebook posts and platforms, social media platforms, that he was going to be a shooter, the girlfriend saying he was going to end up dead one way or the other, they're telling you the story. So one, let's go back to the family who had raised the child. You didn't see the signs that something was wrong with this child. Was he aloof, stayed to himself, mumbled, talked crazy, said things that was derogatory? Nobody paid attention to that. The fact that People magazine or one of the news outlets says that he came from a drug-induced family. So were you speaking of his mother? So why was he in her custody if there was drugs in her possession and her house? Why didn't somebody step in? Okay, so the mother dropped the ball. Why is your child not attending school? Why is this child 18 years old working at a fast food restaurant, taking all this money and saving it to buy damn ammunition, guns? Grandparents, what happened with you all? What happened with you all and the raising to step up where the mother fell off or couldn't provide for the child, whatever the reasons were? She took him to Applebee's for his birthday. And then shortly after that, he's buying artillery, shoots her in the face and goes into a school and guns everybody down. You all don't see something wrong with this? Social media platforms talking about the boy, gossiping about him. He's posting this and that, guns, gory pictures. Nobody sees it. Hey, somebody needs to call authorities and let them know. Somebody needs to watch this kid. There's something wrong with him. He's lashing out visually with posting pictures. Could these children and teachers have been saved had somebody stepped up and called authorities or flagged them on an FBI list to say, hey, this kid needs to be watched. Somebody needs to go to the home and talk to his parents to see where he lives. It is sad that we live in a world where everybody has to now become babysitters of other grown people, children alike. And in the end, it isn't our job to watch people, watch other people's children, watch other adults. Stop Facebook and IG. We see something suspicious and now we've got to pretend to be investigative reporters and investigators about these people putting whack stuff on their Facebook pages and their social media pages. But it looks like that's what some of us have to do. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But as they said, the signs were always there. And remember, there was gossip about the girlfriend saying derogatory things as if she would finish what he started. I do not know if that is true or not, but the fact that she said she knew that he wouldn't live long should tell you something, because 9 times out of 10, he confided in her his thoughts, his devious thoughts of the world. So I blame her as well, because 9 times out of 10, he's told her things in confidence, and she should have reached out to his family and or authorities to say, hey, this kid needs help. I like him, but he needs help. And if you hear somebody talking crazy about shooting people and only talking about murders and school shootings, you shouldn't even want to be in the company of somebody like that. So that means you have a like mind as well, Miss Lady. So maybe we should be watching you. Birds of a feather. What type of young lady would hang around somebody that talks about killing people? Posting derogatory pictures of death. That's somebody you want to hang with? That's somebody you want to date? That's somebody you want to like? You see, this is what's wrong with our youth. They're easily intimidated. They're easily manipulated. Following behind anybody with a pulse to belong. This is nothing to belong to. He was already alienated by the world, so he thought, depending on his background, how he grew up, how he was treated by his parents, grandparents. Obviously, he was not educated. He didn't finish the 9th grade, but he was a legal adult when he purchased the weapons. But he was just like a lot of people out here. He was just existing, breathing. He had no direction, no function, no guidance. And I blame the parents, because he would not have been in my house acting out, talking crazy, acting violent, none of that. And I doubt that anybody could say, hindsight, I didn't see the signs with him. He didn't finish school, so that was problem number 1. If you didn't see any signs, he would not have been in my house and not attending school. So we can't use COVID as an excuse, because a lot of people are using COVID still as excuses for bad behavior and things that were going bump in the night. Hell no. Why was he not in school? What was going on in the household with his mother for him to transition to the grandparents' house? Why did he shoot the grandmother? Cell phone issue of her, what, trying to cut his phone off? Still not a good enough reason to shoot somebody, kill somebody. He was already tainted before the alleged phone issue. Stay woke. The phone is just the end result, the topper. It's not the underlying issue. He was already tainted before the phone call to the phone company, whatever the grandmother was trying to do. It's actually irrelevant. The boy was tainted. He attended Robb Elementary School, same class, allegedly, where he shot up the children, teachers. One teacher survived. In the beginning, nobody ever even talked about him. And he doesn't want to return to the school to teach, and I don't blame him. You hear children speaking in the commentary in the first audio that I played by KHOU, speaking in front of school board. And I don't blame that guy for saying, he's not fired by this time noon. Hey, we want all of you all fired as well. And why are they backing this Arredondo, as you hear Mr. O'Donnell speak in commentary number 2? Why are you all backing him? Why did it take you so long to put him on unpaid administrative leave? You wanted to make sure you got all your ducks in a row, all the evidence. And I understand that, yes, we needed all the information, the video footage, commentary, testimony from people who were in the school, at the school, any officers that wanted to give testimony to what they saw and witnessed. There's so much to chop up in both audios, you don't even know where to start. Because as I said, this starts from the top to the bottom, from our government, local government, allowing people to just buy a gun, walk in, any age, get a gun. Hell, next year, a 14-year-old can go buy a gun. It looks like that's where we're going. Well, he ain't got a background. Go on, give it to him. School board doesn't seem concerned. This is what you hear in audio number 1. Why it took him so long to fire him or put him on unadministrative leave? Why not just fire him? Because when you got conflicting stories after a couple of days, it shouldn't have really went this long to wait for a report from the government. Because he basically told you, I wasn't in charge. I wasn't in charge. So it wasn't my job to exact any protocol or instructions. Why did they not go into the room, those guys that were there? You now have a count of 376, 379, I believe. That's more than what I brought you the other day when I misquoted and said 269 and I meant to say 369. Now the count is even higher of people on the property at the time of this Uvalde shooting. Almost 400 officers. Even in the video of this commentary, you see a guy standing around in damn khaki shorts. Where the hell were you going? Where the hell were you going with shorts on to a gunfight? Walking around holding a damn piece of paper. No direction. He looked like he was just as confused. When you go watch the video of everybody standing outside the school and they're getting information that the children were calling in from inside the classroom, you actually see a guy with a bulletproof vest on and khaki damn shorts. And I thought, why are you even there? You're not even in a full uniform. Hell, I was waiting to see if I could see if he had flip-flops on. This is ridiculous. Why did those officers not breach the classroom before 77 minutes? Were they afraid? I say yes, they were. They did not want to die on that morning. And even though a shield came late into the game, they still had enough time to enter the room when the shield came from the U.S. Marshals, a rifle shield. But that's the point, that when you enter a situation as law enforcement, you have to assess the situation. And time is of the essence. And you can't sit around for 77 minutes waiting on a shield that's conducive to an AR-15. You have to act immediately. So I'm going to say it again. Why did you not go in the windows? Were there not windows to the classrooms? Why did you all sit in the hallway? Why didn't someone take it upon himself to say, it doesn't matter, shoot the lock off, shoot the door handle off? You all had enough artillery in the hall to shoot the handles off the door. Bingo card. Shoot through the metal to where you could open the door. Why not? Where was the janitor? Where did they get the keys from? Why did it take so long to get the keys? Who had the damn keys? See, 1,001 questions. Should Arredondo and these officers that were in the hallway be held accountable for the deaths of the teachers and the students? Should they be charged with gross negligence and or murders of all who died in that classroom? Why didn't Arredondo resign? He has the big head. I'm not going anywhere. I'm somebody important. I did the best I could on that fateful morning. I am not going to resign. But see, the lawful thing would be to resign. That way you can get your benefits. You get fired, I doubt that you'll get them. So you're not a very bright bulb. So you would prefer to be fired by the school board, by pressure from the community and the parents of the dead children, than just gracefully resign because you know you failed those kids and those teachers. And although you talk in the video as if you're concerned about these people, it doesn't appear to be that way because it's just obvious. There were too many people in the hallway for this to have gone on over an hour. And possibly some of the children could have survived. Teachers could have survived. We don't know. It'd be up to a coroner to say, yes, this one could have lived had they made it to the hospital, within 10 minutes or so. And then you have to ask that question. How far is the nearest hospital facility? Then where's the next trauma unit? Because you should know in a small town, they probably won't have a trauma unit at the hospital that can cater to the type of injuries that these people had. Bingo card. Some will probably have to fly out by Lifestar to a neighboring city to be treated. See, all those things matter. But you can't go back now. And we will never know if somebody could have survived or not because you waited 77 minutes. Who was responsible for the deaths of these children and teachers besides the shooter? His parents, grandparents, community, people who saw the Facebook posts, social media posts of him acting out, showing derogatory information pertaining to guns, deaths, shootings. Did any of these people ever call authorities, his parents, school, somebody? Our government allowing anybody to buy a gun? Texas law said, hey, it's okay. Give him the gun. People testifying after the fact how he looked in the store. Too late for that. Water under the bridge. Can't go back. Oh, we didn't see any signs. He looked all right to us. You just wanted the money. Say that. You wanted the money, you needed the money. So instead of this boy, one, finishing school, trying to have some type of life, allegedly bullied in school, don't know how far the bullying went on, if it went up to the 9th grade or not, but nonetheless, they're alleging he was bullied in school, didn't finish high school, working fast food to save his money to what? Go out and kill people, which he did. Short life for a child 18 years of age. With no direction and nobody to back him, nobody to pat him on the back to tell him he's doing good things in the world, nobody pushing him to be a better human being. So as I said, who's to blame besides the shooter? The government, his family, people watching social media, people who knew that something was wrong with him, people who crossed his paths and had direct contact and conversations with him. Who is to blame for the Uvalde massacre besides the shooter? Did people turn a blind eye, such as his family? Did they know this is a demon seed that is in our presence, but we're going to turn our heads and let it work itself out? Oh, it worked itself out. Yes, it did. Unfortunately, 21 people lost their lives. So indeed, it worked itself out, but not to the satisfaction of the parents and the family members in the community that are now left to mourn the deaths of 21 people. This is a horrific story. And as Mr. O'Donnell has said in his commentary, what about the next time? What is Uvalde going to do the next time? Are you going to continue not having appropriate staff in the schools? Are you not going to have metal detectors? Are you not going to make sure the doors are locked properly from the outside? Surveillance cameras to survey the school inside, outside? What are you going to do the next time? What is America going to do the next time? Because there are many schools that do not have metal detectors. There are many schools that have different ways to enter a building, such as a high school. They have many buildings, adjacent buildings, and ways to enter through different doors. And 9 times out of 10, anybody can enter those doors from the outside. So that's going to be your problem right there. The side doors. The outbuildings with different doors. Anybody can just walk into the gym. Anybody can just walk in, a science building or art building. Because naturally, kids have to go from building to building. And most high schools have different buildings. Some just don't have a one building with all the classrooms in it. Some high schools have different buildings. So the children and staff have to be able to enter out of building to building to building. And 9 times out of 10, those buildings are not going to have an officer, nor are they going to have metal detectors and anybody working the entry points. So it will happen again. sadly. And it's not to claim it, but it's common sense. There's going to have to be appropriate protocol. And that means you'll have to hire more people just to work the entry points at different buildings. You see, everything has a cause and effect. And somebody will say, oh, it's going to cost us more money. Now we have to hire more people to stand at every entry point to guard the kids coming in and out. Now we have to check their bags and they'll be late trying to get to class. Well, what do you want? A dead kid, dead teacher, or safety protocols? It's a toss of the coin. Because there's always going to be a complaint. But you can't cry today about people dead and then complain tomorrow about how much it's going to cost to have somebody watch entry points. But that's where we're at. Cause and effect. There has to be a start, or you'll be back here again. What should happen to Mr. Arredondo? What should happen to the officers who were in the schoolhouse? Why didn't one of them step up? You hear Mr. Arredondo say that. Why didn't one of the officers or other entities say, we have got to go in the rooms? We cannot continue to sit in the hallway nor stand outside in heat, holding heavy artillery, waiting on what exactly? Maybe that's why that guy made that comment, that Caucasian male who was standing outside the doorway. Why are we here? What are we doing here? Yeah, why were you there? Hell, maybe that's a damn good question. And maybe he saw all of the staff members in the hallway, officials, and his mind may have said, well, they've got enough people in the hallway. Why are we outside? So you have all these people, nearly 400 officers total. I guess that's including inside and outside. So people are just standing around in the heat, twiddling their thumbs, holding heavy ass guns, rifles to go do absolutely nothing for one man, one 18-year-old boy. At some point, everybody on the property should have known there was only one shooter. So when you have gotten information that there's only one shooter in the classroom, it should have been easy to make a decision to enter into the room and take him down by all means necessary. And if that means you get shot, then you get shot. Sorry. But the risk is no different than the children who were in there minding their business with their teachers, and he stormed in there and shot them. So how's it different? It isn't. They wasn't expecting him. They weren't looking for him. They didn't send for him. So it's no different than them being in there minding their business and being gunned down versus you coming to the school knowing there's somebody in there. And to assume that everybody was dead was a low blow. How in the hell could you assume that there was nobody alive in there? That is the craziest thing I ever heard. Oh, well, I didn't hear any shooting, so I just assumed everybody was dead. Well, they weren't. Some were playing dead. Some were scared to death. I'm assuming all that were living were scared. But some were alive. Some played dead. So you had people alive, including the shooter. So Arredondo, I don't know what made you think you could just stand outside that damn classroom for over an hour, you and those idiot officers waiting on somebody to take control of the situation when there were people alive. And you heard in this audio that there's a child calling the dispatch and they're repeating it. What you say? Oh, yeah, there's a child just called. They said they're alive in there. There's victims in there. And still nobody rushed to the gate to open it, to try to take down the shooter and save the lives of those bleeding to death and those afraid. Just imagine being a little person hovered in with your classmates, wondering if you're going to be the next one to be shot, wanting your mother, your father, afraid for your classmates, yourself, your teachers. There's nothing you can do but watch this lump of flesh hovering over you with an AR-15. Just think about that for a second. Being a little person with no control, wanting out of there, wanting this nightmare to end, but you can't go anywhere. Now imagine being an adult, praying for your children, praying that this thing will remove itself out of the room, praying for the cavalry to come in. God, please save us. He's going to kill us. Imagine that being your last thought before being gunned down. Watching people bleeding to death, and there's nothing you can do, and there is no cavalry entering the door. They're all outside in the hallway, whispering, playing around with keys, while you're in there bleeding to death and watching people dying in front of you, crying and whimpering. You just imagine that. And now, question, was this one-sided, the video that's been released? You imagine dying in a room, watching people die, watching people cry, watching people whimper, watching people play dead, listening to your own heartbeat, praying it will continue to beat and somebody will save you, versus this being a one-sided event that played out on the news. Nobody gives a damn about that. Because you weren't in that room praying for the cavalry. You weren't the one shot up, shot into pieces. You weren't the one playing dead in there. You weren't the one wanting out of there. So in your opinion doesn't mean anything about this is a one-sided video. We really don't know. Oh, yes, we do. Oh, yes, we do. We know that somebody didn't come out of that damn room alive. Somebody lost a wife, a mother, a brother, a sister. Somebody's afraid to teach now. Somebody's afraid to go to school now. We know that for sure. I want to thank you all for joining me. God bless all of you. Prayers for Uvalde. Prayers for a resolution. I pray that Arredondo is fired. I pray that he and his officers stand account legally in the court of law. I pray for the children who have to attend school this fall, that they feel safe returning to school if they do decide to go back to school. I pray that Arredondo does not continue to be on the school board, the city council. I pray that there will be change in their school system as far as security and security measures, and that they have people who are willing to go all out in saving lives. That's my prayer. If you'd like to donate to the Dream of Everyday Shenanigans, to this network, $TheGanji129 Cash App. Thank you all so much for following the content. You all stay safe out there. It's alleged to be very warm next week in the hundreds here in East Tennessee. So if you're in this general area, please stay hydrated and cool. Bless all of you. If you see something, say something. Mind the children. Be a part of the solution and not the problem. For those of you who have listened to my content pertaining to Tyanja Duff, who was murdered on Monday, her services will be on Wednesday. Viewing of her body will be 10 to 12, and then I believe 12 to 2 for the funeral at, I believe it's Greater Warner. I believe it's Baptist Church, if I'm not mistaken. I'll put the information up on my community board. But anyway, her services will be on Wednesday. Prayers to the Duff and Patterson family. It's a very tragic situation because I'm still looking at Facebook posts of people who are posting things, and there are a lot of distraught people here in this community pertaining to the death of Miss Tyanja and also the death of Reese King Jr. They both grew up in the same area and have family in the same area, Northwest Knoxville, the Lonsdale community, for those of you who are not familiar with the storyline. And then I also brought you the death of Jafasha L. Mitchell, who was killed in East Knoxville, and still there's no information pertaining to a suspect. But that video I put on my shorts and my video library is pertaining to someone who was taken into custody pertaining to her murder. That's what was said during the audio of that video, which is not mine. And you hear the officer telling the ladies that is why they were there in Western Heights to detain a possible suspect. So let me make that clear in my commentary. I thank you all so much for joining me. God bless all of you. Have a safe weekend. And once again, Tyanja Duff's funeral services will be on Wednesday in Knoxville, Tennessee. I will post the information. If you would like to also donate to the GoFundMe, the information is posted to my community board. She has 5 children who now have to be taken care of by her mother, Miss Teresa, and said family members. So if you have any donations or gift cards you'd like to give to the children, please go to that GoFundMe page and you can be directed on what you need to do if you want to help out with the 5 remaining children who now are left without their mother. Once again, prayers to the Duff and Patterson family. God bless all of you. This is Everyday Shenanigans.